What's up YouTube, Mr. Lamessy here, and today we're going to discuss what to keep when going over your items. Kind of a general sense of looking at the stuff that you're going to gather from a round of dungeons, nightmare dungeons, PvP zones, whatever it is when you gather up your items, and what you want to be keeping in Diablo 4. So, let's go ahead and dive in. I just finished a nightmare dungeon. Now this is my sorceress. She is level 100. My gear overall is a little bit more stacked, but I'll try and again discuss stuff along the way. Now, we talked about damage buckets and damage in my other video. I'll give that general sense again. Oh crap, where did I put that? Let me see if it's in here somewhere. No. Alright, well, I guess you don't get that sheet. The general sense of the damage bucket, which is your damage multipliers, which you're not really finding on any of these items, so ignore that here. Your vulnerable damage, which makes vulnerable damage very important, especially if you make enemies vulnerable. Your overall just damage to crowd controlled, cold damage, frost damage, damage versus burning, damage versus stunned, damage versus slowed, damage versus chilled, damage versus frozen, damage versus the list goes on, right? There's like 100 damage, just whatever. All of those modifiers go in the same bucket, so remember that's the least important bucket. Then we have our crit damage, and then of course crit chance for our crit damage. And then we have, what's our final bucket? Crit, big damage, vulnerable damage, and main stat. So int or strength or dex, whatever it is for your character, right? Then there's certain builds that may play around with like overpower based on your fortify or something. And in those cases, you will need to, again, look a little bit at what the affixes are that you want. But let's take a look right here. So for my sorceress, what I aim for, if we look at my my stats right here, you can see my crit chance is 38.6%, but thanks to this passive, I gain an additional 60%, which means 98.6% chance of a critical strike. So my build pretty much always crits as long as I'm at or above 100 mana, which means I run a build that also tries to remain above 100 mana as often as possible to help this out. Then I have 131% crit strike damage. I have my vulnerable damage at 223%. Then I have my all damage right here. Again, all of this gets added together, but only when it actually occurs. So if there is a monster that is close to me, which is about within a waypoint distance around you, then I get the additional 32.2%. If they're further than that, I don't. If they're frozen, I get the additional 15. If they're stunned, I get the additional 37. If they're crowd controlled, which is a lot of things, you can see immobilized, stun, knockback, knockdown, taunt, fear, tether, daze, chill, frozen, slowed. Any of those things, I get an additional 113%. Yeah, and just continuing. So anyways, that gives you an idea. You can look at your stats here to see what your chance for like crit chance and all of that stuff is, because you may want to have higher crit chance on your character. Otherwise, if you're running like 10% crit chance, maybe your critical strike damage isn't going to be as important for your character, right? So let's take a look though again, and I'll go through. The first thing I like to do is just push this sort button. What this does is it sorts by item type and then item power from highest to lowest, right? So looking at this, I know that all Helms below this to the right side are less than 793 item power. So that's really good for me to know, because I can be like, okay, well, I like having, I have an 800 item power item, so already it's not going to be a higher item power, which means it'll be a little bit lower armor, but there also is whatever other potential. It could still be good if there's really great affixes. So we can take a look at this. It has intelligence and it has maximum life, and you can look at the rolls as well. So you can see 28 to 42, this is 41 int, And 331 to 718, this is 718 max life. So I rolled near perfect intelligence and perfect max life on this, which is really, really solid. Both of those are great stats. If you look over at my current helm, you'll see I have willpower, which I would rather have intelligence for more damage. And I do have max life there, but it's not a max roll. So this would be an improvement. However, it has cold resistance and shadow resistance. And currently in the game, resistances are worthless. They actually mean nothing whatsoever, basically. They are the lowest form of damage reduction. They're like a broken level of damage reduction. And with the way that certain mobs kind of one-shot you in some of the higher dungeons, it feels like this is actually a big oversight and something that is a bug in the game that Blizzard needs to go and fix. Because if they fix these resistances, then I would actually be able to not just die in a single shot to anything in a Nightmare Dungeon like 70 and up, and then I could actually probably play in those and compete in those. So I hope that they do improve resistances, even if they're not completely worthless. Damage reduction from other sources does seem to just be worth a lot more. So generally, we're not really looking at this, which means this helm isn't worth it for me. That being said, if we take a look right here still, if I didn't have this godly helm, this would actually be a decent helm candidate for me to try and roll on potentially. Because I could say, hey, you know what? If I could roll cooldown reduction on this, this would be pretty solid. Yeah, I wouldn't get the total armor and stuff, but I have the option of getting at least 3 affixes that I would really like. And so this is what you really need to think about is if you ever find an item that has 3 affixes that you really want, it's godly because you can always enchant the 4th one on. If you find an item that has 2 affixes that you really like, but they're like really good rolls, it can still be pretty good because of course you can enchant that 3rd one on. So always taking a look at that is good. Regardless though, I will be selling this because I do have better. And I'm also, of course, looking and seeing what do I like the most. And I like cooldown reduction the most on my helm. So that is my number 1 affix. And you can see I already have 14% right there. Additionally, you should always note when comparing items that you're going to have different ranges. This is because the helmet that I'm wearing is a 5-star. It's upgraded 5 times, where this is not upgraded. And so I have to just look at where the number lies within the range. For instance, 718 is max life, so I know if I upgrade this to 5 stars, this is going to become 1,211 life, which means there is more life on this helm right here than my current helm. Anyways, we'll sell that. This 760 item power, ranks of Hydra and Ice Blades, not really going to do it for me. If you are running a build that utilizes plus to skills of some sort, then getting those can be really nice. And I prefer selling because gold is more important to me than the salvage materials. I find that I have plenty of the salvage materials all the time, but I do not have as much gold as I always could need. Things like enchanting and stuff does get expensive. Again, looking through here, dexterity doesn't matter to me. So that's pretty worthless. Fire resist is pretty worthless. Hydra's pretty worthless. Kind of dead stats on a lower item power. Max mana is really nice. That's 15 max mana and it goes up to 18. And you can see if I did upgrade this 5 times, that would be even more max mana. So I could probably have an additional like 30 to mana or something roughly if I upgrade this to 5 and it was a max roll, which would be really great on my character, especially because I want to stay above 100 mana. So that would be something I would say if on my main helm I had total armor cooldown reduction and then like max life and max mana, that would probably be an improvement, right? But for now, that doesn't have any worth. Continuing on, we can get here. And something to also look at, right? We can see this has perfect cooldown reduction, good max life, and good total armor. So this helm is actually pretty tricky for a multitude of reasons. Number one, this helm is really godly because the rolls that it has on it are actually amazing. The problem with it is it's only 700 item power, which means, and this is a really like dumb thing. I'm actually so happy that we have this helmet right here. If I upgrade this item 5 times, it will get 5 item power for each time. However, there are breakpoints in this game for item power. So when I reach 725 item power, aka when it hits 5 stars, it will re-roll all of the affix, the ranges right there. So now instead of having perfect cooldown reduction at 7.5%, that number will go up some overall. It'll be like, 4.5 to 8.5% or whatever that range is, because it'll move into the next tier of item power. But then it'll do a re-roll, so it could roll down to like 4.5% or 5% cooldown reduction, and I could actually get a worse roll on that. So that's really unfortunate because I can look at this and say, wow, with a perfect cooldown reduction roll, really good life, and really good plus % armor, this is actually a solid helm, but I'm going to get a full reroll on those, and then I could get a really bad gamble. That being said, I could also roll into perfect, where I get still perfect cooldown reduction, better life, and better % total armor, and that would be absolutely amazing. And then the crowd control duration, I could always enchant and try and roll something on top of it. And even though this would be 100 item power overall less, which means I would have less armor from this, if all of those rolls came out perfect, and I could also roll a 4th roll on top of it, right? Because I can enchant over crowd control duration if I wanted. This helm could end up being better than my current helm, although it provides much less armor. As for the affix on it, damaging an elite grants you a barrier. Well, I don't have to worry about that. I can always overwrite that. And that's something a lot of people don't know. They don't know that for elite items, you can overwrite, or for legendaries, you can overwrite the aspect at the occultist. So it's not stuck with whatever it has. I don't have many souls because I haven't done my Hell Tides really recently, but let me try right here and see.
What do you need?
Oh, I need 1 more soul. Oh, that's so annoying. So again, you can see that it's still in those ranges, but with 5 more item power, it will re-roll it. That sucks. This would be so good for the video if we had that final one, and the Helltide just ended. So, pointless now. Regardless, well... Oh, I guess I can go the preview. So, there you go. The preview actually... Will the preview actually show what it's going to roll to? If it... Wow. Okay, so now I know, without using the souls, this is actually new to me, that this is garbage then. Because the cooldown reduction, you can see, will actually go down. It nerfs it because it's now hitting 725 item power, which you can see puts it up to 6.5 to 14.6%. But I got a terrible roll on that. And so instead of having that perfect 14.6%, it now will go down, which I can then say, all right, this is going to be garbage. I don't want it. The life is also rolling mid. The total armor rolls okay. Yeah. So 725 is the highest breakpoint. So after that, it's not going to re-roll anymore, I believe, unless someone corrects me. But I know right here, again, cooldown reduction is the most important for me. And on my current helm, I have 14%. And so this will just be an overall fail, essentially, for that right there. Additionally, this is a sacred legendary helm and not an ancestral legendary helm, which is the final piece that I did want to bring up. So you can see that it does have, for instance, a lower max life roll, it appears. While the cooldown reduction and the total armor rolls are the same, it looks like the max life roll is actually lower. So there's still some things I'm learning out about items and such. But Sacred is going to be, this could be great to give to whatever. However, due to, I'm not going to complain about the game, but it's required level 100 because I found it at level 100 and that's just whatever thing. So ultimately, this becomes a worthless item. Had it binked 10.9% total armor and 14.6% cooldown reduction, even with the less max life, I still probably would have considered upgrading this and putting it on, because if I could have rolled the crowd control duration, though it looks like it did roll perfect on that, then I, potentially would have, either used it or re-rolled that into intelligence or max mana or something great. But as we learned right there, it is garbage, and so it does go in the sell bin right there. Moving on, all white and blue items are trash. They have not made them useful in the game, and so do not worry about those. They will just always be garbage. Rare items right here, you can see that armor, my current armor is only 790 plus 25, so there is room for more armor right there. Additionally, I have fire resist on my armor, so my armor has room to be improved for sure. However, right here, we're getting pyromancy skill damage, conjuration skill damage. Whenever you see two skill damages or something on skills that you don't use, then it's always just worthless.
Well struck.
Always salvage upgrade items. I didn't really care. I've got enough materials and everything. It doesn't matter to me. This one right here has some frost skill damage, but remember that gets added in the big damage bucket, so it doesn't do as much. Same with cold damage. Both of those are pretty worthless to me there. I'm moving forward and I'm going through, and this is a pretty good example of something where I could say, okay, again, mana cost and resource generation are nice. I do want cooldown reduction on here. Willpower and lucky hit chance while you have a barrier is pretty meh for me. It's okay. For weapons and for if you have a focus for a source or something, the DPS is very important. So that is something that you do want to focus on, is making sure that you're having really high item power right here. So this would be a decent tank off, dropping 30 item power. But one thing we'll note is this does have an affix or an aspect that is decent. It's not perfect, but it's decent enough. It's one that I use, and so I'll go ahead and keep that. For unique items, a lot of them, unfortunately, I just don't care about because they just don't give things to what I use, and so we just will sell that. Here is a staff, and this is a decent staff right here. We can see it has vulnerable damage, though it's a low roll. It has critical strike damage, and it's a high roll, and so those two things are really great. However, it also has lightning critical strike damage at perfect and basic skill damage at 40%. If I was a lightning character, this would be really solid because I'm getting vulnerable, lightning crit, and crit strike, and basic. So if I was running Arc Lash or something like that, then I could use that. However, I would probably keep this and re-roll on the basic skill damage right there, just to try and get a higher percent of it even, because 40% is pretty low. That being said, it's only 773 item power, which again is a decent tank off in damage overall. And so once I hit something like that, I know that every staff beyond is going to just be lower and lower. And even if it rolls all the affixes I want, if it's 50, 60 item power below on a weapon, it's just not going to be worth it for me. Now we can move to the wands, and again we go up. This is 813 item power, so slightly better. But it has ultimate skill damage, which I don't care about, damage over time, which I don't care about, overpower, which I don't care about, and this one is just unfortunately not going to be there. Same thing right here. This is not really giving enough of what we're looking for. Damage to frozen, stunned, crowd-controlled enemies are all nice mods. But if we, again, think about damage buckets, all of those three will go in the same bucket where I already have tons of damage. Whereas I would rather have intelligence. I would rather have crit strike damage, which you can see on my current wand. I would rather have damage that spreads across those buckets, brings those other buckets up, because my damage 2 bucket is always going to be filled the highest, which means damage 2 is going to be worth the least for me. Additionally, unstable currents isn't really anything I care about, so we will drop that. And now the item power is starting to get lower, so I will be selling all rare wands at this point. And basically, what I look for on legendaries is aspects. Is there an aspect that's worth extracting? Is it something that I think is good enough? Or is it one that's perfect? In which case, I like to extract perfect affixes just in case I want to change my build up later on. I have a perfect affix. Moving to gloves, we can see again that my current gloves don't have the highest item power, but what do my current gloves have? Perfect crit chance, near perfect attack speed, perfect ranks of ice shards, and really solid lucky hit chance. Those 4 things are all godly, which means this is an amazing set of gloves. Those are like my top 4 things that I want on gloves right there. I hit my perfect gloves and great rolls on it as well. So this is great for me, and even if there's better armor, it doesn't really matter. Now, the ones that we have over here, again, Fireball, Frozen Orb, Incinerate. If there's all of these plus skills and they're not ones we use, they just really aren't going to do much for us. This is a lot of stats. This is Charge Bolt, Strength, again, stuff I don't care about. If you have gloves or something that's already really solid and you find new gloves that have 2 affixes at least you don't want, then they're pretty much done. Right? They just don't matter at all. So here, Meteor, Firewall, Potion Drop Rate, it's garbage. I like that aspect, but that is the worst roll of that aspect, so I don't care for that. Looking at boots, again, look at my boots. 4 to Teleport, I use it. 4 to Frost Nova, I use it. 21% movement speed, fantastic. 3 to Flame Shield, I use it. All of that is usable by me and is stuff that I care about. So it's hard, again, to upgrade boots because I need, at the very least, them to have, plus, max Frost Nova already on them. And so it's hard to really find much better. So a lot of the affixes are just not great, right? Movement speed after killing an elite or stuff versus injured, things like that. A lot of it's too situational. And so I'm really looking for flat movement speed plus to the main skills that I like, all of this. Stuff like mana cost reduction is nice, but even things like all stats, it's I would much rather have my int be much higher there. And lastly, when we get to rings and amulets, the biggest thing I can say is Sacred, remember, are going to have some lower affix rolls. So be careful around there using Sacreds. For instance, if I go to my stash, I have a great example. Let me just go here really fast. This is a great example. Look at this ring. Max life, crit strike chance, vulnerable damage, and crit strike damage. On top of that, crit strike chance, vulnerable damage are perfect rolls. Crit strike damage is medium, and max life is medium. This is a fantastic ring right here. But you know what its problem is? It's sacred. And what does that mean? It's just not going to be able to roll as high as the other one, right? Look at that. Crit strike damage on the sacred rolls 15 to 22.5%, but on an ancestral ring, it rolls 21 to 31.5%, right? Same with vulnerable damage. It only rolls up to 24.8%, so even though I maxed it there, my ancestral ring is just better. Now, that being said, item power on your ring and amulet doesn't matter at all. It is, I'm pretty sure it's entirely worthless, but it's at least for the most part, completely worthless. Maybe it has a tiny bit of worth. And what does this do for us? What does this mean for us? It means the item power needs to be 725 plus. So the Sacred Ring can roll the max stats, but it has to be 725 plus, which again, you're not going to get for the most part. So basically, just be going after Ancestrals for all of this. And for pretty much all of your gear, that's going to be an important part. Make sure you go after the Ancestrals, because if you are going after Sacred or after low item power items, it's not going to roll as high, right? So this is where the item power does come into play. But again, once you get to that 725 plus, I believe you're in the clear. I think everything after that is going to be good. Like I say, for the most part, that's all Ancestral. So you're really just looking for Ancestral pieces right here. And so now I can look at something like this and I can say, okay, this is a decent ring. Great crit strike chance and crit strike damage rolls. But I don't have vulnerable damage. I do have damage to crowd controlled enemies, which is nice. So on this ring, for instance, if I re-roll the max life and then I upgrade it, then this can be really great, right? I can re-roll max life into vulnerable damage. I could get really good vulnerable damage on it, and then this would be a fantastic ring. And then I just have like damage to crowd controlled instead of damage to frozen, which is going to be a little bit better anyways for this build. Now, I might have slightly less to the resistances at the top or something, but again, nobody really cares about the resistances at the top. So this ring right here is a ring that I just need to upgrade and enchant over and over again. But before I do that, I guess we'll make that the other video. So that'll be another video. I was just going to say the enchanting order and all of that. Basically, you want to do your enchanting first before you imprint and upgrade. Actually, just before you imprint. I don't think upgrading matters. So, yeah. Hopefully that gave you a good sense. I just wanted to go through my inventory and give you a sense of how I look at all of the gear, how I look at the affixes that I've rolled, what could be better, what could be worse, what it all means, if something hits that item power that we like or not, everything. Hopefully this was helpful and gave you a better sense of it. Again, with every character, you're going to have a slightly different idea of what you're aiming for, but the main pieces that you're still going to be aiming for are on any of your weapons or rings, things like that. Crit strike chance and damage, unless you're running no crit strike. But again, with it being its own bucket, it's usually a good idea. Vulnerable damage, which is just too important. Every class needs to roll that. Cooldown reduction, pretty good on most everything because, again, trying to get your cooldown reduction stuff. Some sort of resource is usually not bad, whether it's resource reduction for the cost or a max mana or whatever. That's not always guaranteed on every build, but usually it's pretty solid. And then when you get to certain armors, having like your attack speed is always helpful, having your lucky hit chance. If you are running a lucky hit chance build, be very knowledgeable of if lucky hit chance matters or not. On a sorceress, it's very good. And then stuff like damage reduction versus close, damage reduction from burning, whatever it is. With my enchantment, every skill, direct damage from skills, applies burning damage. So pretty much everything is always burning as soon as I hit it once, which means that damage reduction from burning and such is now much more important. And then, of course, your basics like total armor percent, cooldown reduction, max life, whatever your base stat is, that stuff can be really important. So, again, it will vary on characters. Overpower, fortify, that stuff can be important on, your druid or whatever. But you need to, again, just think about these things a little bit and probably find a guide that maybe gives you a little sense of this is at least what you want to be aiming for. And they won't always be perfect. Sometimes you'll find that, oh, wait, for my character, I actually like it a little bit more if it does this or that. But that's all whatever. I will stop my rambling here and let y'all go. Mwah! If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, YouTube. Peace, everybody.